Well, it is my huge pleasure to welcome today to the podcast the award-winning, best-selling Ann Cleeves, OBE, author of beloved series, including Vera, Shetland and Two Rivers, both to read and watch on TV. Not only do we love Ann's books, but we love the fact that, like us, Ann is an Archers fan. Ann, welcome.
Thanks very much. It's lovely to be here.
Delighted to have you, Ann. So, Ann Cleeves, OBE. You've written more than 35 critically acclaimed novels, won awards, spawned TV series, but does any of that come close to Vera being mentioned by Susan on The Archers?
That was pretty special because I have been an Archers fan. I think since I was a teenager, I was trying to work out how I came to first listen to The Archers. And my parents didn't listen, so I must have stumbled across it, I think.
So you've been listening since, well, for 8 decades then, have you?
Since the 70s, anyway. Yeah. I think our French teacher wanted us to get into Radio 4 because the Alain Fournier Le Grand Monde was being read in English on Radio 4 as a book at bedtime. And I'd never come across Radio 4 before, but just loved the stories and the talk. And I think I stumbled on The Archers then.
So when you heard Susan mention Vera, did it stop you in your tracks, Ann?
I just thought, wow, so Vera's made it then. She's on The Archers. And Susan, who's quite picky, likes her. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, we just love to hear that. And I'm interested because when you were young, you lived in rural Midlands, so different to your books. But so did you grow up in Ambridge, Anne?
Almost. Yeah. Well, when we were first married, we lived in Worcestershire, very close to the village that everybody said was Ambridge. So that was quite interesting. And you could see the Lickey Hills, which are not quite the Lakey Hills, but almost. Hanbury was the village that everybody said, oh, this is Ambridge, they said. I was never quite convinced.
So you've listened since the 70s, as you said. Can you remember any outstanding storylines from back then that stay in your mind?
I just remember it being really comforting. I can remember listening to it when I was cooking on Fair Isle. I was the assistant. I'd dropped out of university. And just by chance, a meeting, just luck, met somebody in a pub in Putney who told me that they were looking for an assistant cook if I was desperate for a job. And I was pretty desperate for a job. And they must have been pretty desperate to have somebody to be assistant cook because I couldn't cook and I didn't know anything about birds and I was working in a bird observatory. Off I went, and I can remember listening to The Archers then, and some of my colleagues, the assistant warden, just sneering because I was listening to The Archers. But I've since discovered that he's become an even more passionate fan than I do. Yeah. And he runs quite high-end birding tours overseas. He downloads The Archers, so he's in some fancy lodge in Tanzania. And there he is listening to The Archers. So it serves him right.
We like to focus on what we call our faves and our flops in any week. What we've really liked, what we haven't liked, the characters that we've liked or not liked. Are you listening? Presumably you're listening up to the moment. Are there any particular faves or flops that you have?
Well, I've recently done the Gibraltar Book Festival, so I've only just got back. So I have been trying to catch up. And I think that very, very moving scenes between Helen and Rob Titchener I've been listening to and hoping that she wouldn't do anything silly. And in the end, she didn't do anything silly. So that was all right. I think that was good. And I think what's great is that you have that. And in almost the same episode, you have Jacob dressing up as a gladiator. And it's that mix of the ridiculous and the very moving that I think works so well. Not sure if there were any flops, really. Well, I suppose I do worry a bit that everybody turns out to be nice in the end, like Joy, who was a terrible busybody and everybody found very difficult, and suddenly she's become quite saintly. So it's quite good that Rob Titchener was really nasty right at the end, even when he was dying.
What do you think of George? Because he's been set up to be a nasty piece of work, and suddenly he's becoming rather... He's been softened, hasn't he?
And the same with Jazza, who was just a wild tearaway who did no good to anybody. And then suddenly he's this respectable married man who's working for his family and not drinking too much anymore and all that. So, yeah, there is that sense, I suppose, of redemption, that there isn't anybody really, really nasty, because Brian was very horrid at one point, wasn't he?
He had his moments.
Yeah.
I mean, talking of Helen, I mean, I'm currently reading your book, The Raging Storm, and this passage caught my eye in Raging Storm, chapter 15. It occurred to Jen that she too would hardly be heartbroken if she got a call saying that her ex had died. She'd be curious, of course, but there'd surely be a moment of relief, a sense of lightness, of a burden being shed. Perhaps, too, there'd be no more of the nightmare memories. Remind you of anyone in the Archers, Anne?
Yeah, a bit like that, doesn't it? I suppose, I don't think that fed into it, but I loved writing Jen, who married too young, married badly, had kids too young, ended up in an abusive relationship. But now she's come through that, and she's trying to catch up on all that time that she missed out when she was young. So she parties very hard, and she's quite promiscuous. And I love that idea of somebody who can catch up and have a bit of fun in her early middle age.
Because she's worried, isn't she, that her daughter doesn't have enough fun. She's too nerdy and geeky.
Yeah, she wants her daughter to be out partying too, because she might regret it later, without realising, of course, that we're all very different and we all have take pleasure from different things.
Would you like the baddies in the Archers to stay as baddies? I mean, you said you liked Rob Titchener. He was awful right to the end. Would you like the ones they set up as baddies to remain baddies?
I don't know, you see, because Eddie was always fairly horrible, wasn't he, when he was young? And now he's this avuncular, jolly chap who does the occasional bad deal but isn't a waster anymore. I quite like that. I quite like that sense of redemption, really. I think
do you?
I like a happy ending, yeah.
I don't know if you're like us, Anne, but when a new character comes on, we are over-analysing everything because we can't believe we didn't spot Philip Moss the minute he came on the scene. And
No, he was a baddie all the way through through, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, but when slowly revealed as well. Mm.
Yeah, that was very clever. Really, really clever script writing.
So do you listen to any clues that they might give or any red herrings that the script writers give and try and form your own view on the character before we know the full story?
No, that would be too much like work, I think. I just sit there and listen and let myself be entertained. I am delighted. I like Hannah because Hannah, the actress who plays Hannah, is also a member of the Border Readers, which is a group of actors up here on the Scottish border. And they go into libraries and pubs and village halls and read stories. Mm. And I love that she's one of that group. And they're reading at the moment some crime stories written by me and others. We call ourselves the Murder Squad. There are a number of us who write crime in the north of England. And they're reading a number of our stories in the wilds at that moment. So it was lovely that she had an Ambridge connection too.
Because, I mean, are you still doing your outreach work as well?
Yeah.
Because...
well, the project is still going. I've got this amazing team of
Reading
Public
for
Health
Wellbeing,
England
isn't it?
people. Yeah, Reading for Wellbeing. So there's a team of Public Health England workers and library workers, and it's all headed up by Jane Hartley, who's kind of coordinates it all. So it's a bit like writing, really. The ideas are the easy bit, and then somebody else does all the hard work. And so I had the idea, but we're really going from strength to strength. We're employing a lot more reading workers and bringing people together to talk about stories and trying to divert people from the NHS if they're lonely or a bit sad or have got chronic pain that doctors can't really help with. We find that reading does help. either reading as an individual and just having a chat with a worker every now and again and finding books to make you laugh or cry or take you somewhere else completely, or coming together as a reading group. So that's what's happening. We're hoping to ease our way south, take over the country.
The power of books.
You said just now that you obviously listen to The Archers for relaxation, but as a writer, do you not sometimes sit there analysing the construction and wondering how you might do it?
No, I really don't. It's like I watch Vera on the telly, and if it's an original story, I've only written 11 Vera novels, and there have been more than 50 episodes, so most of them are original stories written by scriptwriters. I don't try and analyse it and say, oh, that's a decent bit of dialogue. I'm just there like any other punter with my cup of tea, watching it and being entertained and looking to see what's going to happen next.
Talking of Vera and, of course, Jimmy Perez and Matthew Venn, your fantastic detectives, they're all wonderful in that through your books we get to learn more and more about them and the different layers of their personality. Which brings me to a question about the resident police in Ambridge and Harrison, who possibly doesn't have quite as many layers as your brilliant detectives. What's your view on Harrison, Anne?
Yeah, I haven't heard about him recently, but last time I heard he was going to try and become a wildlife liaison officer, wasn't he? I don't know if that's actually
he failed
yet, but that would be good.
He didn't get the job, sadly.
Oh no, he didn't get the job. That would be, because that would be quite an interesting storyline to follow, I think. But Tim, my husband worked for the RSPB for most of his career, and he did work with the wildlife liaison police officers looking at things like the poisoning of birds of prey. And when we were first married, Tim worked for investigations, and we would do quite a lot of cops and robbers things. Like I remember going undercover into a pub where people were trading rare birds' eggs and trying to work out what was going on there. So that was good fun.
Do you think he's a lousy detective, though, Anne Harrison?
I like them all. I go in with, I suspend my disbelief. I just go in and enjoy them all. I don't judge them. I think
we do.
I'm just, yeah, I'm sure you do.
We've built a podcast out of it.
I don't. Yeah, and what a lovely relationship he's got with Fallon, and that's very nice. And
yes,
yeah, maybe they're all a bit too nice, apart from Philip Moss, who was very horrid.
Would you like to see more crime in Ambridge, Anne?
That would be silly, wouldn't it? A little village in the Midlands. I think they put quite a lot in. Poor Helen off to prison, and Philip Moss, yeah. People smuggling and gangmasters and arson and no.
Okay, all right.
I think I need, at the end of the day, while I'm cooking my supper, The Archers is the time between me stopping working and the beginning of the evening when I can relax. And I cook my supper and listen to The Archers. And it's good to know that all in this crazy world and all that's going on with climate change and unsettling politics and wars, to know that in Ambridge, Susan's still a gossip, Clary's still salt of the earth, and all will be well.
Yes, absolutely. For me, listening to The Archers, it's like a comfort blanket. Yes, I love the big stories, but I also love the sort of more mundane ritual stories, like the Christmas event, the Christmas pantomime. I'm all over that. Are you the same with those parts of the storyline?
Yeah. Love Linda Snell. Again, I might have missed something, but is Alan going to get her engaged in filling the church with crafts and arts and good works? Because I think she could do with a bit more activity. And Jakob and Usha, that'll be an interesting partnership, running the community project. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing how that goes. Two strong characters with their own ways of doing things. I think that'll be great fun running up to Christmas.
You mentioned just now, Anne, some of the more serious storylines that there have been over the years, and was just wondering, as a former childcare officer and probation officer, how do you think the Archers handle social issues?
I think they do it really well. I think they do it because it's a long series, because they have time. They can actually develop those stories sensitively. It's not rushed and it doesn't have to be melodramatic. And obviously the Rob Titchener thing, it took a long time for most of us to realise how controlling he was, and the whole coercive control thing, which was actually when it started was quite a new concept, I think. And maybe it only recently become law, that idea of coercive control. And so I think they do manage to do it very, very well.
But they put them on the map, don't they? I mean, they've put coercive control and modern day slavery at the front of popular entertainment.
That's right.
In that sense of the word, yeah.
And I think that certainly the modern day slavery thing, it made me as a listener more aware that we can't dismiss lads who look as if they're just not working very hard or seem a bit intimidated. We need to think about who we're employing, I think. That message came over very, very well.
Yes, I think it does a great job about educating us on all sorts of matters. For me, it's even eggs with thin shells, when Josh had his problem with his eggs being, the shells were too thin to be accepted. And now whenever I have an egg and I'm cracking it and the shell's too thin, I think, oh, what would Josh make of this egg?
Yeah.
I mean,
food of course, it started off as an education programme after the war for farmers, wasn't it? For farmers and growers. And they still do a bit of that. So Kirsty and her rewilding and all the conservation stuff that goes on, I think, is really, really good too.
I was just going to ask about food, Anne, because on our podcast, food, well, Quentin's not so keen on it, but I'm very keen on any mention of food and what might be being prepared. And we announce it with joy every week, what they've been talking about. Is the food as important for you, or does that go quite low on your radar?
I'm always interested. I'm always I always feel very intimidated by Jill. You know, obviously I should already have made the Christmas cake by now, and I've got all the grandchildren here stirring it on Stir Up Sunday. I'm not quite sure when that is, but I do feel I'm lacking in the cooking department.
Well, you've got to be better than Ruth, Anne.
Yeah, that wouldn't be hard though, would it?
Well, talking of that, I mean, you're talking to us from North Tyneside. Are you Team Joy or Team Ruth?
Oh, I love Joy. I think she has become the saint of Ambridge, hasn't she? Not being judgmental, listening, quite the antithesis of Ruth, who jumps in with her judgments, you know, about poor Pip and her new relationship and sticking her foot in it. And and you would think she would be a bit more sensitive than that, because she was quite right on as a young woman. So that's a bit sad. So I'm definitely with Joy. Listening, not judging, being helpful, not sticking your nose in when it's not wanted. And I think it's great because Helen has become very much her friend, hasn't she? And they're different generations, different education probably, but still very, very close. And I love that. Two women backing each other up in difficult circumstances.
Are you like me? I'd like to see Joy fleshed out more. Are there other characters? I've got Ardil in mind as well, who you'd like to see fleshed out more.
Ardil, who again we thought was the saviour of Grey Gables and it was all going to be wonderful, and then he panicked and ran away. So that, we definitely need to know more about him. I think I agree. I'd like to know more about Joy's background and what brought her there and why she did at first seem very lonely and needing the support, and suddenly she's transformed into this person who is giving support rather than needing company.
Do you think Rochelle exists, Anne?
Rochelle, is that her daughter?
That's her daughter. Is she a phantom daughter?
Oh, I don't know, because we never see her. But then you see, because I know a little bit about telly now, I know that actors are expensive. If you're writing a crime series, in real life, there would always be a forensic pathologist and then a separate crime scene manager. Every series I've seen on television, they're the same person. And I did say to the producer once, well, can we not have, why? This is just not real. This isn't how it would be. Oh, yes, but extra actors are so expensive. So maybe she's just priced herself out of the market.
Well, we have a theory that maybe Joy is under witness protection, and that's why she's arrived in Ambridge.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
That's reading too much
into it. She could be a murderer herself, of course. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes.
Just released on life license, released from prison.
Yes, she can't go very far because of her ankle tag, maybe. That's why she has to be back home in the hot tub.
That could be it. She always wears baggy trousers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Might be onto something, Anne, here.
Yes, it could be like the witch in Hansel and Gretel with the boys.
Can I share another frustration with you, Anne?
Oh.
Do you get frustrated like I do when a character is just about to tell us something really significant and another one just pops in and disturbs the conversation and we never get to hear what was going to be said? It drives me nuts. Does it you?
But you do hear eventually.
Yes, I know, but I want to hear now.
That's called maintaining the tension, I think.
Okay, all right.
Dramatic tension, that is. I think we just have to go with the flow on that one.
All right, Anne.
I think you're just too picky. I think you need to enjoy it.
I think I'm too impatient, Anne. I think yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Okay.
While you're with us, Anne, can we talk about your latest book, The Raging Storm, which I have enjoyed so much. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And the words for me were so visual. Just as I picture Ambridge, I wondered how visual you are picturing the scenes as you write them. Do they play out almost like a movie in front of your eyes?
Yeah, I think it has to, really, because if the world that you're creating isn't real for you, it can't be real for the reader. So I need something concrete in my head to be describing before I can start writing. And The Raging Storm started because I was invited onto set when they were filming the first book in the series, which is called The Long Call. And they were filming in Hartland Quay, which is in North Devon. And people think of North Devon as being very pretty and big beaches and surfing and cream teas and thatched cottages. And of course it is all that. But I wanted to do something that was a bit less touristy. And Hartland Quay, there's no village there like Greystone, but it was pouring with rain and blowing a hoolie and these great granite cliffs and a grey shingle beach. And that's how I got the idea. So it was very visual. It was that sense of place that I started with and just built a village up the cliff.
That's interesting. I mean, I felt absolutely drenched and battered by the first few chapters in the book. And that sense of place, again, I've got another passage here I highlighted, which sort of ties in with the Archers as well. Venn always used a paper map, studied before setting off, but Venn said it was important to understand the region's geography, physical and human, which I found interesting because within the Archers, do you get a real sense of place? Because there are literally countless maps that have been published of this fictional village, but these maps exist. Do you get a sense of place within Ambridge, like in the way that you give us a sense of place in your novels?
Yeah, I think so. Not as a map maybe, but a sense of place. I can see each of the farms probably now. It's a bit more difficult now that Brian's moved into the cottage because if we're talking human geography, he doesn't fit into a small cottage. He needs to get the big house back because then I believe in him a lot more. There must be some way of getting him back into it. Was it called Ambridge Farm, I think? We need him back there, home farm. We need him back there.
Yes.
In the big house with the swimming pool and all Jennifer's design and that. I can't quite see him in a small cottage. But yeah, my daughter's a human geographer. And I think that's what I like to do in the book, is to look at the individual within their community and within their landscape, really. I think we are a product of the places we grew up and the places we live and the kids that we played with and the view that we see from our window. All that feeds into the people that we are.
And as well as the book, we do need to talk about the audiobook because it's narrated by Jack Holden. It's absolutely superb, I think, and not all audiobook actors, narrators are that good. Were you pleased with the result?
Absolutely delighted. Yes, Jack. His parents come from North Devon. He was the lead in Warhorse on the stage. So again, that West Country background. So I think he does it absolutely beautifully. And we've done a couple of events together, and I'm hoping that he'll be free. We're doing a big fundraiser for the RNLI in North Devon when the paperback comes out in Ilfracombe to support the lifeboat there. And I'm hoping that he'll come along and do that with me. And we're hoping to we're calling it, I think, Stories from the Sea, and hoping to get some of the lifeboat crew to come and talk too, because next year is the 200th anniversary of the RNLI. So we're going to celebrate that in any way that we can.
Sounds like it would be a marvellous event. Can I just ask, though, about the voices, because you have some quite different characters and accents in the book. I'm just wondering if you throw a new one in now and almost titter to yourself about what Jack's going to have to do to perform.
Yeah, how are you
that.
going to do a Scouse accent, Jack? Can you manage that? Yeah. It's a real skill, and I love Janine Burkett too, who reads the Vera audio books because she's local here, and she's another of the border readers who goes out and tells stories along the Scottish, Northumberland, Cumbrian border to entertain people, and stories which are so important, I think.
I'd like to ask you, Anne, do you have a penchant for letters at the bottom of the alphabet? We've got Vera, Ven, and Perez, and your names, giving your names right at the top of the alphabet.
Yes. Oh, names are really difficult because I want names that belong in the places. It's back to place again, isn't it? So Perez, you wouldn't think would be a Shetland name, but there was an armada ship, a Spanish armada ship, wrecked off Fair Isle, which is the Shetland island that I know best. And there were 60 survivors in the 16th century scrambled ashore. So it's not outside the bounds of possibility that one of them married a local woman and that the name has continued. And then I wanted to call him Shetland because that's very much a North Devon name, but people said, no, you can't call him Shetland. It's too close to Shetland. So then there is a quarry, Ven Quarry in Barnstaple, where the book's set. And Ven is a slightly boggy bit of waste ground as well in North Devon dialect. And Ven is actually a character in the Thomas Hardy book, Return of the Native. And of course, in the first book, Matthew Venn is coming home. So that just seemed all to tie in very, very nicely. Vera Stanhope, yes, that name occurred. Vera wasn't supposed to be in the book at all, the first Vera book, which is called The Crow Trap. I had a new young editor who decided that she didn't like detective series. Nobody was ever going to read them again. They were too old-fashioned. And so I started writing a book which wouldn't have a detective in. It would just have these 3 women who were doing an environmental survey in the Northumberland Hills. One of them would die, obviously, but there would be no detective. But then I got stuck because I don't plot in advance, and was writing a funeral scene. And it was Raymond Chandler, I think, who said, if you're stuck with a book, have a guy burst through a door with a gun. But I thought, well, I'm not going to do a gun, but I can have a door burst open and see who comes in. And who came in was Vera, fully formed. I had her name, and Stanhope is a village in County Durham. So that's, I think, how her name came about. And looking more like a bag lady than a detective, I describe her as. And there she was. And luckily, the editor who didn't like detective series married a music journalist and moved to Australia. So I could carry on writing Vera.
Thank goodness.
But I mean, I'm interested when you're writing, like, so this is your third Venn book. How hard is it? Because you want to embellish his character more in each book and reveal more layers. And yet, presumably, you want to keep some for the next book in the series. Is it quite hard to manage that, or does that just come naturally because you've written so many books?
I don't really think about it. I tell the story that I want to tell and give the information that I want to give in each book. And the next book, I think, will take care of itself when I come to do it. Because there will be more Venn books, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do you, I mean, you're prolific, Anne. How do you come up with all these ideas?
Well, I do a book a year. And as I said before, ideas are easy. You know, there are ideas everywhere in snatches of overheard conversation and newspaper headlines and just things that you see in everyday life and people that you meet. And sometimes you just want to explore a subject. But the hard bit is turning the ideas into 100,000 words of novel that somebody might want to read.
Are you an inveterate eavesdropper?
Yes. Love it. Love this time of year when people forget to draw their curtains but put their lights on, and you're walking down the street and you get glimpses into everybody's domestic lives. Absolutely love that.
So can we ask what's next? When we've devoured the raging storm, what book can we look forward to next, Anne?
There will be a new Vera book out next September. So I'm just doing copy edits with that now. So nearly done with that, which will be good fun, and then I can move on to something else.
Fantastic.
I read that no more Shetlands. You've got nothing else to say on that one, is that right?
I did 8 books set in Shetland, and although the BBC series is back, and I think working really well with a new central character, there are only 21,000 people in all the Shetland Islands, and you can only kill off so many of them books, I think.
They seem to do all right in midsummer.
Yeah, but I'm hoping I don't write quite that sort of book.
Well,
I don't think the murders are the central part of my book, really. I think the murder is a structure to hang it on, but I'm more interested in exploring families and what holds them together and what keeps them apart, and communities and how they work.
Well, and speaking about communities, our community on Facebook have come up with some questions to ask you, if that's okay, because they're very interested. Quentin, I think you've got the first one.
Yes, it comes from Rob, not that one. And we call him Nice Rob because he always gets his leg pulled. And he wants to ask you, Phoebe Aldridge is up in the wilds of Scotland at her eco startup. Any chance of her winding up in Shetland?
She ought to go to Shetland. No, it's such a wonderful place. And if she's really into the whole eco thing, it is very self-sustaining, Shetland. You know, it's, as I said, only 21,000 people, but it has its own milk and butter and beer and gin and obviously lots of sheep and lots of lamb and mutton and lots of fish. So she should go and see it. And you can see otters and you can see the northern lights and you can see amazing bird life. So yeah, she ought to do a visit to Shetland.
You ought to write about it, Anne. She ought to take Mia with her, shouldn't she, as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do like those young activist young people in Ambridge.
Yes, they're fantastic. Well, the next question is from Pam, who says, Vera is a compassionate yet cranky and therefore relatable woman. Which character of the Archers could you envision her having a cup of tea with, and why? Plus, what kind of biscuits would they be having? Biscuits is very important to us.
Oh, you can see her sitting down having a good chinwag with Joy, can't you? Same sort of background. And if Joy is a recently released prisoner, then Vera would be keeping an eye out for her. Biscuits. I think Vera likes a bit of self-indulgence, so dark chocolate digestives, I would say.
Oh,
though
that's
Joy would have baked something very special.
Yes. She'll have a sachet ready for it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Anne, we've got a question now from Dawn. She says, Could any of the Archers' storylines, past or present, be an inspiration for your next crime novel or an episode of a current drama?
Oh, that's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because we think of the big ones, like the people trafficking or Rob Tishner's coercive control, but maybe something like Brian's infidelity would be quite a good storyline to turn into a crime novel, keeping his relationship secret and that real ambiguity, because he did love Siobhan, didn't he? He really did. And then there was the child that he and Jenny taking on a child who wasn't hers. It was a very interesting and compassionate storyline, I thought.
But personally, that is my all-time favourite storyline, actually.
Yeah.
I think that really hooked me in, and I've been addicted ever since.
Yeah.
It was a great storyline. Yeah. Thank you for that, right, Philippa?
The next question is from Monica, who says that Ann Cleeves is an Archers fan is further confirmation that she is a kindred spirit, an all-round wonderful person. I just love her Vera and Shetland books. She perfectly composes in the area between cosy, which I don't like, and gruesome, which I can't read, to create detective novels which transcend the genre and are really literary novels. I'd love to hear about when she listens, and does she listen to the individual episodes or the omnibus?
Yeah, it's usually individual episodes, and it's either, as I explained while I'm cooking my supper, to break my working day from my sitting in front of the telly with a glass of wine and relaxing bit of the day. Or I listen sometimes to the 2:00 episode because I get up very early and I write best in the morning. And usually about lunchtime I go out for a walk to just stretch my legs and straighten up after being staring at a computer. And if I come back in time for the 2:00, I listen to that. And thank you very much. That was a lovely thing to say, and I'm very, very grateful.
Do you ever indulge in the omnibus, or have you had your fill by Sunday?
Yeah, I usually don't, because Sunday I've got 2 daughters and 7 grandchildren who live locally. And so Sundays I might well be just doing lunch and not listening. With lots of noise going on.
We'll let you off, Anne.
Well, Anne, we come to the last question, and each week when we're interviewing somebody, we ask them a question that they want us to ask the person that's coming on the next week. And last week we were fortunate enough to interview Jeremy Howe, who is the editor of The Archers. So we said to Jeremy, right, Anne is coming on next week. What is your question for her? And this is Jeremy's question. So, Anne, would you ever write for The Archers? Love, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah, ask me. That would be fun. I'm not sure I'd actually write the scripts, but if they could have me in the room and sort of plot out the storylines for the next few months, I'm there like a shot. Thanks, Jeremy.
There we go. Absolutely.
We'll let him know, Anne.
Absolutely perfect. Well, Anne, it's just been a sheer joy to talk to you about your love of the Archers and your books and the latest, The Raging Storm. We're just so grateful for your time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's been great fun.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.